and Big 12 Media Days. We're now joined by Gary Barnett, former Colorado Northwestern football coach, a part of Colorado radio broadcast with Craig Smoke and Paul Catalina, and I'm David Smoke. Coach, thank you so very much for being a part of the show. When you look at year 2 with Deion, what do you see as a former coach, or what you think is possible?
You know, David, when you're looking at Deion, it's not like looking at anybody else. And so it's really hard. I mean, those of us inside the program, and I say inside, I'm just barely in. You know, we've got so many new faces and so many new guys. I went to an event the other night for 40 CU players at the event. There was one in last year's team. So it's really hard to tell. You know, his use of the transfer portal is legendary. He's been very active. So it's really hard to tell. But you go and you look, and you've got a quarterback, the quality of Shedeur Sanders. You've got the receivers that most of which they have back from last year. Travis Hunter, very, very special player. I don't care where he's playing. On the secondary, they're solid in secondary. I think they're solid to linebacker spot. It's going to come down to just what it came down to last year. Can you run the football with your offensive line and your running backs, and can you stop the run in the interior defensive line? And those are all brand new guys, every one of them. So it's really hard to predict right now. And of course, you can imagine how many times I get asked to do it. I don't ever know until I start going to practice in August and get a feel for what kind of competition is there for each drill. You know, what kind of camaraderie and leadership is displayed during fall camp. So it's really hard for me to say, but I do know that if you got a quarterback and receivers and the secondary they have, you've got a chance.
As someone who coached for a long, long time, when you strip away, and like you said, you've never seen anything like Deion before, and he's genuinely the first celebrity coach who was well famous before he did any kind of coaching, like that in college football especially. But when you strip all that away, all of that stuff that's on the outside, from your observation as a fellow coach, how does his coaching engine run similar to everybody else, and what makes it different?
It doesn't run similar to anybody else. I can tell you that. You know, Deion was a great, great player, and he's hired some former great players to be around the program and to coach. I know when I would hire a great player, they weren't always good teachers because they didn't really know what made them great. They just did what they did. And you've got to be able to tap into what makes the difference in a player from being average to being great or being really good. And you've got to be able to teach them that. So we're all sort of watching this from a distance. I can tell you this, everything seems really organized. Everything, works on time. I don't have a lot of complaints about last year. I thought time management was a real issue for him in a couple of different games. And so I think that's got to improve. But he's got a different way of doing things. But when I'm at practice, it's upbeat, it's organized, it's great tempo. There's guys getting after it. And now are their guys good enough to get after it on Saturday?
Coach, you mentioned Shedeur, and they obviously have a couple of headliners in both he and Travis Hunter as well. Can you just speak with your experience to the talent levels of both, and just kind of what you expect from those guys? Having seen them last year, what do you think that should be the expectations, or what you hope to see, I guess, coming into 2024?
Well, I think Shedeur is a special player. I think that he's a very, very thrower. He's as mobile as he needs to be. I think he was in a system where he had to look at a lot of different reads, a lot of different option routes, and I think he probably held the ball longer than he really wanted to last year. I think the system this year that they're employing is going to be more direct reads, a little more 1 to 2 to 3 kind of thing. and they're not option reads, so it's not where you're chasing the guy around all. But he's very accurate. You know what, he says the right things. He always carries himself the right way during the games and after the games. So I really do think he's a special player. I think he's a top 10 pick in the draft next year, and one of the top 4 or 5 quarterbacks in the country next year. I really do think so. Travis Hunter is the most special player I've ever seen. I have never seen an athlete that is more skilled and more competitive than Travis Hunter. If you would go to practice and watch the way he practices, and he goes both ways in practice. He never gets tired. He never wants out of a game. He wants to be in the middle of everything. His ability to catch the ball is incredible. And defensively, he had 2 interceptions last year in man coverage, and they weren't thrown to his man. They were thrown to somebody else that he just instinctually reacted to and was able to make the play. So I don't think I've ever seen anybody at the talent level that Travis Hunter is. Now, are they going to play him as much next year? I don't know. Would I play him? I probably would. I mean, you got a guy like that? What the heck? I mean, he's the best player on the field, so why not have him be one of the best 11 when you're on offense and one of the best 11 when you're on defense? So he does not have any problem with that. He loves it. In fact, he really relishes playing both ways.
Coach, that in the NFL, it seems like you have to have a star quarterback. Sometimes we've seen teams win without one. In college football, do you need an alpha at quarterback to win a championship?
I think you do anymore. I think because offenses are so quarterback-oriented. 20 years ago, 2001, we were 3rd ranked in the country. We didn't have an alpha quarterback. We had a bunch of alpha guys running the football, and we had some guys receiving the ball and playing defense. But it's all changed now. The spread's changed all that. Your quarterback is so important to your offense. It's happened. You can see the NFL now. It's the same way. If you don't have a quarterback in the NFL, you got no chance. And so it's I definitely think you need an alpha there at the quarterback spot in college football these days.
Who was your quarterback in 2001?
Craig Oaks, wasn't it?
Well, Craig started, but Bobby Pesavento ended the year, the last 8 games, and was in a bowl game. So, and Bobby was one of my best friends today. He was a good player, but we had a lot of players around him, and he knew that, and that's the way he played the game.
What does Pat Shurmur bring differently to the offense this year now as the full-time offensive coordinator?
Well, it's a pro-style attack, and it's going to be a little more conservative. It's going to be, I don't know if you call it a pro-style attack more conservative, but the system we were in last year really relied on you being able to run the football, and we could not run the football. So we could not play complementary football. When our guy when Kent State came in, they ran the ball really effectively at Kent State, and that allowed them to do all the things they did. But we couldn't do that. We couldn't do it for 2 reasons. Well, really, yeah, we had a running back issue, but I don't think it was that severe. We had more of an offensive line problem last year. And hopefully some of that's resolved. After watching spring practice, and some of that is resolved, I think. But in this league, in this game, this level, you better play good up front, both sides of the ball, or you're not gonna. It's gonna be tough to be a champion.
Coach, you won 4 Big 12 North Division titles as the head coach of Colorado, also the 2001 Big 12 championship, an incredible victory over Texas in a great game. 2-time Big 12 Conference Coach of the Year. What's old is new again, I guess, with Colorado in the Big 12 after that stint in the Pac, and we know what happened there. Just your thoughts on the Buffs being back in the Big 12. Not the same one they left, mind you, as all conferences look a little bit different, but your thoughts on just being back with some of the teams they used to play against on a regular basis?
Well, I played the Big 8, coached in the Big 8, and then we became the Big 12, and so I'm a lot more at home in Lawrence, Kansas, and Manhattan, Kansas, and Ames, Iowa, and Stillwater, and those places And so it's a pretty easy move for me back, and I love it because all those are such football towns. You know, you go to the West Coast, and it's a completely different environment. But going back to these places that are just solid, Midwestern, Waco, football schools and football communities, that's really cool. And every weekend's really cool going to those places. And I love my experience, all my experiences in the Big 8, Big 12, and now back to the Big 12. And well, I think we're all looking forward to it.
Gary, I mentioned this, and I by no means, I don't know how to split it, and I'm not asking you to, and I'm not asking myself to, but as far as the greatest rebuilding jobs in college football history, what you did at Northwestern, considering who they were, and getting to a Rose Bowl, which you said get to Pasadena when you first took the job, and what Bill Snyder did at Kansas State, as you as an old Big 8 guy, would you agree?
Yeah, I would agree. I'm Bill Snyder was the guy that I probably looked up to as much as anything, and what he did at Kansas State, and we all, you know, back to my playing days and early coaching days in the Big 8. I mean, Kansas State was it was a problem. They just couldn't do it. But what's happened since Bill Snyder? And really, I remember playing them in 1991. In 1990, we ran all over them. In 91, it was a really hard game. And I said to other guys before I had to go to Northwestern, I said, this is never going to be the same playing Kansas State. And Bill Snyder just absolutely proved that to be true, as have the coaches after him. Chris Kleiman has just taken that step as well.
Is it different coaching players at a Northwestern than everywhere else because of the academic requirement? I mean, not like you're just coaching a bunch of dummies, you know, other places, but because it's such an elite academic school, Northwestern, Stanford, there's a few schools like that where the expectations off the field are elevated, obviously.
You know what it is, and I get asked this question a lot, as you can imagine, but what I found the biggest difference between the Northwestern kids and anybody else is that initially they're just more responsible. They've been more responsible their whole life. And so whatever has been asked of them, they've done, they've reached out, they've been creative, et cetera, et cetera. And so you don't have a lot of, you don't have a lot of off-field issues at Northwestern or Stanford. You don't have a lot because they've been responsible their whole life. And when you run into issues with your football programs, not at Stanford, not at Northwestern, it's just because guys become irresponsible. So to me, that was the key, was that the kids at Northwestern were so responsible. You never had off-the-field issues. You never had locker room issues. You know, they just had always taken care of business. I mean, we would run a class of 22 kids, and 15 of those would have been captains on their high school team. So you just got that kind of player. They're good players. They're athletes. They want to be athletes, but they're also responsible enough to meet all their off-field requirements, all their academic requirements, and you just don't have those issues.
Gary, if you don't mind me asking, I need myself mental health to ask you this question as a longtime Nebraska fan. Can you go back to the week prior to that game? They had run the Big 12 since the mid-'90s with Frazier and all those guys with Coach Osborne, and they were unbeaten. You know that. And you made comments prior to that game and then backed them up in that game that you were going to gut them. What did you see? Because some people thought you were just saying that, but you did it and then beat, as I think Craig brought up or Paul brought up, that you beat Texas in an incredible game up at AT&T Stadium in Arlington.
Yeah, well, you know, we had just come off a couple pretty big wins, and we had a lot of momentum going. I don't remember saying we're going to gut them, but I do remember reading an article in the Lincoln paper by that one of the coaches said, you know, we have to change the way we practice when we go against Colorado. And I knew right then and right there that we really had a chance. And I played that up with a team, because when you have to change the way you practice to be more physical, that means you're not physical. And they're looking at us and going, man, we got to practice really physically. Well, you just don't turn that on overnight. And so we had a great game plan. We realized that with several kinds of motions, we could take one of the linebackers out of the box. We'd have five guys to block five guys, and we had five good guys blocking at that time. And so that's what, we creased them for a lot of yards just right between the tackles. And, of course, then we had a couple of great tight ends, and we were able to play action them and hurt them. But, the fact that we could run the ball right between the tackles really was a problem for Nebraska in that game.
No question. I mean, Chris Brown had a field day. I said AT&T Stadium. I meant Texas Stadium
Right.
in Irving when you hammered them and followed that up, or beat them in Boulder, but followed that up with a win against Texas, who had a heck of a team themselves. Coach, thank you very much. We look forward to Colorado being a part of the conference. Look forward to having you on, if you don't mind, in the future, because it's fun to hear from somebody who's been there, done that, and what you've done in your career, and we appreciate your time.
Well, just give me a call anytime.
Yes, sir.
So, appreciate it. Always enjoy being part of this.
Yeah, Gary Barnett, Colorado Buffaloes radio color analyst, former Northwestern, and also Colorado football coach. And